So here's one way to look at it. In 1792, our young republic, George Washington as president, hits its first economic crisis. And credit markets freeze. Does this sound familiar? It almost brings the country to its knees. And here's what happens. About every 15 to 20 years, we have another crisis. We called them panics. We had different names for them. Depression. But they happen about every 15 to 20 years. For 140 years, the pattern is just unmistakable. Then we hit the Great Depression. And coming out of the Great Depression, we put 3 new regulations in place. Glass-Steagall, which divides our community banks, basically from the Wall Street investment banks. FDIC insurance, put money in a bank and know that it's safe. And some SEC regulations so you can invest on Wall Street and they can't cheat you too directly. That's what we put in place. For 50 years, we have no bank failures, no major crises. It works. Now, there's innovation, there's change. It's time to change regulations. It gets to be the early 1980s. And what do? Instead of saying new products, we need to change regulations to adapt. We take a different path. We say,
you allow banks to go in the insurance business and vice versa?
Let's deregulate. That's exactly right. We begin to break down the old regulations. We say, who needs regulations? They're so pokey, so old. So we go with this idea of let's get rid of regulation. And what happens? Late 1980s, savings and loan crisis. Should have been a warning. Late 1990s, remember long-term capital management, the hedge fund, should have been a warning, but we let it go. Early 2000s, Enron, bad books, not telling the truth, should have been a warning, but we let it go. And where do we end up? In the biggest crisis since the Great Depression. Markets are wonderful. They produce great wealth for us, but they are by their very nature something we call pro-cyclical. When they're going up, they chase themselves up. Hey, wow, it's doing great. Up they go, and when they go down, they chase themselves down, and they go lower than actual supply and demand would suggest. Now look, we can live in a world of ups and downs for the rest of our lives. We can say, who needs regulation? Let's just ride that roller coaster wherever it goes. But you know, we have to remember, when it goes down, it doesn't just take down the people who gambled. It doesn't just take down the people who invested on Wall Street. It takes down everybody who's got a pension. It takes down folks who have jobs in construction industries and other industries that get hit by this. It takes down, in this case, it takes down homeowners, people who thought they were doing the right thing to protect themselves for the future. It takes down the prudent along with the gamblers and the wild ones.
Which is where we are today.
Which is exactly where we are today. So we could say, hey, no more regulation, that's fine, but look what it's brought us. We are not willing to let these big financial institutions fail. We've got this too big to fail notion, so we are going to shovel billions of dollars in their direction and still take the position we shouldn't regulate them. This is a world that may be a lot of fun for the high flyers who get theirs and keep theirs, but it's not a world that works very well for ordinary families.
What about the argument that says, quote, when you boil it down, you're talking about us becoming a socialist nation. You buy that?
You know, I'm sorry, I just think that's just silly. The argument that we're socialist, every game has rules. And this is really about where we're going to set the rules. Are the rules going to be that you can be so big and so powerful that the U.S. taxpayer ends up guaranteeing you, in effect, too big to fail, but there's no regulation? That's a crazy set of rules. If you're going to be that big, if you're going to put my future at risk, then I want to be able to say somebody has to watch you and make sure you don't take risks with what could turn out to be my money. That's not socialism. That's just good sense. You put me at risk, then I want some restrictions on what you do.